All right. Hello.
Happy Monday.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us today on Monday, the 22nd.
That's right.
2 o'clock. Always here on Facebook Live for the Rabell Realty Group podcast. You can also find us live streaming on YouTube. So thank you and follow us now. Today is going to be a really special day. We have a great visitor guest and we will introduce him soon. But today we're going to reintroduce ourselves. I'm Kristen and Rebecca, and this is
Rebecca Johnson.
All right. The brokers of Rabell Realty Group. Again, always happy to see you on here. And we are going to start off, as usual, with our Monday Market Moment.
All right, everyone. So here's a snapshot of what things are looking like for February. So far in February, we have 176 active listings for your Gainesville residential housing and attached housing units. That's not a whole lot. Pending sales are up. They're up to 451, like we talk about every week. This is definitely including some new construction in there because you can see it is outpacing the homes that are on the market. And then closed sales so far for this month are 186 homes.
Yes, and that is all just for February. So I know this weekend I put 2 of our Grand Oaks houses under, pinned under, so that's 451. Oh, yeah. I don't even have them online yet, though, as pinned.
You know what? I pinned a couple things over the weekend, and I have not.
Resales?
They weren't done when I did this either, so there's actually even more things that went under contract. We had a house in a great gated community, and it went under contract essentially the first 24 hours. So it's a hot market out there. So if you have anything, happy Monday, Sky. So if you have anything that you're looking to list or put on the market, please reach out to us. We are desperately seeking homes to help others find and buy. But yes, that's your Gainesville snapshot of the week and for the month of February. And I think we're going to get right into our special guest.
Yes. What I do want to ask is our producer, can you please lower the music in our ears? I can't hear anything, which is why I was texting you.
There you go.
Sorry. We definitely want to hear each other as we talk, especially with our amazing special guests coming on. Is it still loud in your ears?
No, I don't hear anything.
Oh, it's blaring in my ears. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Loud in your ears or was, nope. All right. Just blaring in mine. That's great. Okay. Now that I can hear what's going on. Sorry. Technical difficulties. We want to introduce our guest today. So we have Kevin Williams on.
Hello, ladies.
Hello. Thank you.
He is a local Gainesville appraiser, and he's here to talk to us about the market, appraisals in general, tips, tricks, things you can do when your home does or does not appraise, and real estate in general. So drop your questions in the comments, and otherwise we'll just
talk.
In.
We have 1,000 questions ourselves, and we've been talking a little ahead of time. So hopefully we can revisit all of those questions we've already had him answer.
Take it easy on me.
Well, let's start with the basics. Yeah. What is your company's name?
Gainesville Appraisal Service.
Perfect. And how long have you been an appraiser?
I started in 2006, moved up to Gainesville and started my own business about 10, 11 years ago.
Wow.
Perfect. Did you do appraising before where you
I
were
did.
before?
I was down in West Palm Beach.
Okay.
And then my wife moved up to grad school and then started.
That was my next question.
Started appraising
here.
and all that. So yeah,
Everybody moves to Gainesville for somebody else, don't we?
it was supposed to be just
Well,
for
look at
2
that.
years.
Jordan Spitzy says, or Harden now. Jordan Harden now. Favorite appraiser ever.
Thank you, Jordan.
Actually, when I posted on Instagram and Facebook, a couple people private messaged me, said that they used you and loved you.
Very good. Thank you.
And thought it was great. So a little bit about appraising. Why don't you explain to maybe the people who don't know this, how you are hired?
Most of the work comes from the lender. So I do the appraisal. The lender that hires me to do the appraisal for the mortgage transaction. Sometimes if it's a cash purchase, the realtor will contact me and I'll do it for the realtor. But most of the, about 95% of my work comes from lenders and mortgage brokers and locals banks.
And so when it comes from a lender, it's not like Robert Filia of FMT is calling you directly and saying, hey, I need you to appraise this home for me, wink, wink. Right.
Right. So there's a rotation system. A lot of lenders, and a lot of the local lenders are really good. They kind of keep, they know who the local appraisers are. So that's the one thing where a lot of kind of issues come up. Out of town appraisers coming up from Ocala or Lake City where they may not understand the market, where sometimes that's my recommendation to a lot of realtors. It's like, talk to the realtor, talk to the appraiser, find out where they're from, make sure they know the market, because Gainesville is a very unique market, and that's the most important thing, making sure somebody knows the area. So I live, in Gainesville. My kids go to school in Gainesville, so it's like I'm immersed in the community. So I'm not going down to Ocala and doing appraisals and things like that. So back to kind of your main question is the lenders have a rotation system. So they actually hire us kind of on a rotation system. So the loan officers don't even know who the appraiser is.
Right, and they're not even allowed to
so
talk
there's no
with you.
communication
Right.
or anything. So a lot of them have appraisal at their headquarters. They have an appraisal department, and they are in charge of assigning the orders, and it kind of goes on a rotation system.
Now, how do you appraise the homes? Like, what is your typical procedure?
Yeah. So the main thing is. The first step is to go out and look at the home, look at all the updates, get the square footage, bedroom, bathrooms. The next step is to kind of go back to the office and survey sales in the area. So the appraisal is based on sales kind of in that, and we call it the market area. So it can be your exact neighborhood. If you live in a Tioga, most of your sales are going to be coming from Tioga. If you're a Hale Plantation, most of the sales are going to come from a Hale Plantation. So I'll run typically a 1-year sales search. I'm trying to find the most recent sales. That's one thing. We're kind of in a very hot market right now. So you want to get the most recent information. So we look at closed sales, active listings, pending sales. And I try to give, usually 5 or 6 sales in the area. based on the square footage, bedroom, bathrooms, and all that, trying to find like similar properties.
Now, what if you are staying in the neighborhood, but say it's a newer home built in there, or one of the largest or smallest, so you're not really finding the same size or age in that same neighborhood?
Right. So we try to bracket everything. So if the square footage, if a house is 2,000 square feet, and most of the sales in the neighborhood are maybe 15 and 16, I'm going to branch outside of that direct neighborhood to go to other comparable areas. So when I'm actually appraising a house, I'm thinking in my head that I'm buying it, and what other homes would I consider up against this property? You know, do I want to stay within the school zones? Do I want to stay within an exact neighborhood? So I kind of visualize that I'm buying this house. What other homes would compete against this house?
Right.
And that's kind of how.
So you're not necessarily looking within like a mile or two range. You might, like you said, look at the elementary school, you know, and see what other homes are in this elementary school location, school zone.
Yeah, and that's what, when we bought, my son was in elementary school, so we wanted to kind of stay within a certain school zone. So we kind of, you know, made a map of that school zone and said, okay, these are the areas that we would consider. But also too, if you can do school zones, you can do zip codes. I try to, you know, just that goes back to knowing the area where, you know, what homes compete against each other, and that's kind of the main thing. Just kind of looking at different neighborhoods, different areas, and also, for instance, the university. You know, you may want to be within a mile of the university, but you could be a mile north, or you could be a mile south, or a mile west. Right. But if you work at the university, you may want to be a certain radius. So that's where the MLS is good, where I can kind of draw a mile map around the university and say, okay, this is the area that they would consider. So that's, and an appraisal is an opinion of value. So you could have multiple people come in and have different opinions.
Right.
That's true. Right.
So that's one thing that.
Well, what are you seeing right now in today's market? Because it's a very different market, and we know we're seeing a lot of things like lack of inventory, you know, hot market, lots of buyers, escalation clauses. So let's all talk about that. What's happening right now?
Yeah. So there is a huge demand for affordable housing. You know, certain areas, anything under 200,000 is getting bought quick, and it's selling. You know, there's times where there's multiple offers on it.
Does that play a role in how you appraise homes?
So yeah, so we do analyze pending sales. If you know, if a home did go under contract within a certain amount of days, more than likely it sold for full price or maybe even more, then I would reach out to the realtor and just say, hey, you know, tell me about this home. How's the the contract price? You know, did you have multiple offers? And try to get a feel for it. And so that's the thing, you know, analyzing active listings and pending sales in the neighborhood, because as the market changes, and that's where we're getting into the buying season too, where, you know, this was kind of a weird year with COVID, but February and March is kind of when the buying season starts. Right. So, you know, there's no inventory now, but what's going to happen this summer when, you know, everybody's looking for homes? So.
Sure.
It does. I'm going to list my pool home. That's what's going to happen.
So we have a question up here from Waldemar Carrera, who's a local lender in town. Hello, Waldemar. Thank you for joining us. Because of, you probably know him,
I do.
Right?
He's
because
at Union Home Mortgage, is it?
Yes, he still is, yes. Because of how the market is right now, and sometimes sellers have a bidding war, does having offers above asking price increase the value of a home since you have so many buyers willing to pay more for the house, or is the value just based on sold comps? Which is kind of what you were sort of talking about right now.
Yeah, so we look at it, look at pending sales. That's the main thing. But sometimes it gets in a bidding war where the sales don't justify that contract price.
Right, not even the pended.
Yeah, so there was an instance where, you know, it ended up getting bid up, I think, $10,000-$15,000. But meanwhile, I had two sales on the same exact street that didn't justify that contract price.
Okay.
So then it's like,
you just can't do it.
And
you call the realtor, try to talk about the situation.
Yeah, and one big thing I do is I look at the interior photos. So, for instance, okay, if that one house across the street didn't have a renovated kitchen, but we have a renovated kitchen, then you take those things into consideration. You
start playing with that,
right? Yeah, and that's where at the end of the appraisal, so I establish a value range. Sure. So there could be a $10,000 to $15,000 value range, but if I have a renovated kitchen, a renovated bathroom, new roof, then I'm going to reconcile that value at the high end of the value range. Sure. So if I'm looking at the house across the street and it's outdated and all that, I can adjust up for nicer condition and things like that. So that's when kind of the appraiser's judgment comes into play, where knowing the area and things like that is very important.
Are you finding there's a certain area or price range that this is not happening in as an appraiser, and it's either not enough sales or not seeing this exceeding price per se?
Say that again?
So like you said, there's a lack of, affordable homes, right? And a lack of inventory as well. Are you finding areas where you're not seeing that as an appraiser?
Kind of the higher end market. So some of the...
Well, higher end, do you mean, 5 to 6 or more like 9, 8 to,
I would
to
say
a million?
From 7 to a million.
Yeah, okay.
It goes back to the market participants.
Yes.
There may not be that many people looking for $1 million homes. Even some of there was a couple that were up in like the 1.2, 1.3, even $2 million range, where it took them a pretty long time to sell. And it's just a matter of the right person coming by and buying it.
For sure.
So it kind of goes back to kind of who the market participants are and how many people are looking for that price range.
All right.
So I have a question. Zillow is always a hot topic with anybody in real estate and, of course, consumers.
Especially now, right?
Oh, yeah.
Back in the news.
Yeah, they're buying up everything. We get a question. Sometimes when we go in, we have to do our comparative market analysis, which is not the same as appraisals, but we try to be very considerate and thoughtful when we look at it, because we know you're going to be knocking at the door wanting to appraise it. Sometimes Zillow has what they call Zestimates, and they can be extremely high or extremely low for homes. But I find that almost every single seller looks at it before we walk through the door. How would you explain a Zestimate to somebody that's selling or buying?
When was the last time Zillow was in your house?
Oh, geez. Well, Alexa, when was the last time Zillow was joking?
You know what I mean? So Zillow doesn't understand the interior of a home.
Correct.
Which that's the main thing people want. You want that updated kitchen. You want that updated bathroom. Zillow doesn't understand that. So they look at things kind of based on just the numbers of it, the square footage and all that. They don't know that it had a new roof, a new AC. Zillow does actually tend a little bit behind. So I could be wrong on this, but I think they pull a lot of their information from the deeds.
Yes.
But if the deed's a month or two behind, their data's a month or two behind too.
And we know that's been going on with COVID, where they've been behind.
They were a couple months behind, not just 1 month.
So Zillow can run, 2 to 3 months behind. So with having, a good realtor, they can run the sales inside the neighborhood and get the most accurate information. So Zillow can be way wrong. Especially in rural areas.
Oh yeah.
They don't.
Especially.
They're way wrong.
Or sort of mixed use areas where there's a lot of lower income and then super high income
like
areas.
For instance, kind of like the Duck Pond area.
Right.
You go 2 streets over, you're in a completely different market.
Right.
Zillow doesn't know, hey, 8th Avenue may be the cutoff point.
Right.
So that's the one thing where it's like Zillow doesn't understand, and that's where, getting a local realtor or local appraiser, like those are the things that make a huge difference.
So how many sellers are calling you ahead of time before their listing? Do you get a lot of those?
Sometimes we do, especially if they have a nice home. Their main concern is they have a very nice house that they're afraid maybe won't appraise.
Right.
So we can kind of go in and say, here are the sales I would use. You would hate to get a house under contract and it not appraise. Like that's really, so, having the sales, but that also too is the realtor, they can kind of do their diligent where they can have the sales and justify the contract price and all that. So sometimes we'll get calls where people are doing pre-listing appraisals and they want to make sure that, hey, I may be the nicest home in the neighborhood. What would the home appraise for if I did put it on the market? So every now and then we get some.
How long is an appraisal? I know how long. Appraisers are typically great for years, but how long is an appraisal typically?
How long does it last?
So an appraisal is actually an exact day.
Yeah.
So
especially in this market where it's changing all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's the day that I looked at it is the day that the appraisal is. Certain lenders have certain criteria on when they can use it, but something could change where you appraise a house and behind it is a vacant, a wooded lot. But meanwhile, the next day the county approves this water treatment plant.
Oh my goodness.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
I think they're dealing with that out in the Micanopy area. There was like a chicken facility that wants to come. And so,
facility, right.
yeah, we had some
so
questions
you know,
on that.
that's another thing where, you know, the local, different things like local news and just all that can,
Really
so
affect
the,
something,
yeah, so the
right.
appraisal is actually that one day.
Or even something can go under contract
Oh,
the
absolutely.
next day, and it didn't, and it wasn't used as a
Yeah, and I
appended one, right?
I try not to let one sale dictate the market.
Sure.
So, you know, sometimes there's outliers and that's where maybe calling up the realtor and saying, hey, you know, this sale seems really low. What happened? Oh, it was a divorce.
Sure.
They want it out. So those are the things where, you know, kind of the due diligence and kind of looking at it and just kind of, you know, kind of doing your research on, you know, what I'll do is when I work the sales into my sales grid, if I see something that sold for a kind of low that was kind of, you know, I'll call the realtor and just say, hey, what happened? Tell me a little info. And it could be the home inspection came back and needed a new roof. So then they deducted the
Right.
price a little bit. So finding those things out are nice to know.
Well, let's get back. We're going to have to take a little break. We forgot about the break. We have so many questions. We could talk for hours probably. But let's go ahead and take our break, and we'll be back with more questions for Kevin.
I discovered Rabell Realty Group through networking, and so I got a chance to know Kristen and Rebecca through those networking events, and we always, you know, got along really well, and we vibed and we clicked, and I just liked their personalities and I liked them as people. And so when I had the opportunity to join Rabell Realty Group, then I felt that it was a good fit for me. The problem that I was looking to solve when I joined Rabell Realty Group was a sense of community and a place where I could feel like myself and like a sense of belonging within the group that I was working with. It's a very laid-back environment, you know, it's very welcoming, and it's a place where I feel like my personality fits well. Rabell Realty Group and its resources have helped me reach my goals in several ways. It allowed me to just kind of sail forward with my personality and with the things that I enjoy doing. It gave me the confidence to kind of pursue some like marketing ideas that I had. I would recommend Rabell Realty Group to somebody else for several reasons. Yeah, I've mentioned them already, but it's just a very open group. I mean, everybody's laid back, everybody's welcoming. Kristen and Rebecca always have your back. You know, if you get into any kind of crunch, real estate can get tough and some transactions aren't easy. And then the fact that they do have lead sources is important. I really like their marketing and the way that they do things, and the energy of the entire group is just something that aligns with me as a person.
All right. Thank you for joining us again here on our podcast with Kevin Williams, the local appraiser. We're asking a lot of great questions. And we have one question up here. If it's a haunted house, does it affect the value?
That's a good question. I never had that one before.
Does it depend on the type of poltergeist that it is?
Haunted, I don't know.
I would think that if it had a, like, so there's obviously a house out in Micanopy
Right.
that everybody knows. And I was wondering, sorry, I know she works for us, if that would affect the value, if it had a reputation.
Yeah, so circling back around, kind of processing it in my head. For instance, if they did it for like tours or something like that, it could be, you know, you could analyze the income from it and all that, kind of doing it. Like, for instance, if a house had like an accessory dwelling where they had a guest house in the back and they rented it, you know, they could, if they did tours and all that, but I don't know if there's a dollar figure you can be able to put on a
I mean, in
house.
St. Augustine, it's a good thing if
Oh,
your
yeah.
house is haunted. But here, it's
You have
a
to
weird
say it
thing.
is in order to sell
Yeah.
them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because I know on our side, it's not required to disclose if a home is perceived as haunted because
Right.
it's, you know.
It could scare people away. So you may have to.
I know. I wouldn't be like, ooh, a haunted
yeah.
house. I want to live there. I want dishes to fly across the
Right.
room. And so, yeah.
All
So that's
right. What
interesting.
house in Micanopy? Well,
I'll
we'll
tell
talk
you
about
off-
that later.
yeah.
So the other question that was up,
Had to do with pool values
with
and
pool
kitchens.
values and kitchens, renovations, bathrooms. You know, those are kind of expensive renovations.
Right. So the pool, I generally try to compare pool homes to similar pool homes.
Right.
So also what you could do, for instance, if there's a neighborhood, for instance, that a lot of the homes are similar, if there was one house in the neighborhood that sold with a pool and one did not, you could kind of extract the value based on all the homes being similar and how the pool kind of contribute to the overall value of it. The kitchens too, it all depends on what's kind of custom for the neighborhood, where, you know, a $200,000 house and you put a $100,000 kitchen renovation in it, that's more than what the market wants in it.
Right.
So, you know, kind of keep in mind to what the community wants and what the typical market participants want.
Do community amenities make a big difference? Like if you live in a community that has parks and pools and walking trails,
right?
Does that affect how value is?
Yeah. So
but don't you still try to stay within that
yeah.
area?
So for instance,
like
if it's
Tioga.
if it's a Tioga, you're going to use homes inside Tioga. Where I did an appraisal the other day where they had a community pool, but the people didn't use the community pool.
How did you know this though?
What's that?
That they didn't use the community pool?
The lady told me.
Oh, okay.
So she was telling me how, you know, they left room in the backyard to put in a pool and all that. And I was like, oh, that's great. I was like, don't you have a community pool? And she's like, yeah. And she was telling me about, you know, how they had.
I find that a lot of people tell me that. They're like,
we don't want to
have
use
a community
that
pool, but we have room for a pool. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why would you?
So I think they used to go there, but there used to be frogs in the pool. So she didn't
Lots of
like
people
this
would
is
not
what she's
like
telling
that.
me.
We
Yeah.
live in Florida.
Yeah. So
And frogs like water, much
You're
like
right.
So do
other.
snakes.
Yeah, I know. There was a snake in my pool area the other day.
Nope.
So if you put in a pool in a neighborhood that has a community pool, sometimes people may not give it as much value, if that makes sense.
Right.
But it's all kind of personal preference. And all
Well, I know we're running out of time, but we have a couple questions. Now, one is about a VA loan. We'll go back to the other one, and we'll come back to this. But you don't do VA loans.
I don't.
So
FHA and conventional.
So FHA and conventional. What's the difference between FHA and conventional when you're appraising?
Yep. So FHA, they have a little bit more. They want to make sure the property is safe, secure. Where, you know, our job is just to tell the lender, hey, these are the items that
Don't comply with the rules or what have you. Right.
Peeling and chip paint's a big thing. Exposed wiring. If you took a ceiling fan down and the wiring's still exposed,
Okay.
that's kind of we mostly look at it from
Bars on the windows still?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So the security bars, those are on the bedroom, so they have to have 2 ways to get in and 2 ways to get out.
Right.
And that's another thing too, where sometimes it may be a little nitpicking on our end, but if a realtor, like for instance, an outlet cover, you know, that's very minor, and I hate to call that out, but that's,
you have to.
yeah, so, you know, the realtor can kind of maybe look at these things where, okay, that may not pass FHA inspection.
Right. So as a listing agent, you really need to
You should know those things.
figure out those things to
Yeah.
know if an FHA appraisal will be able to happen or not.
Because
right?
if we condition it for these issues, we're going to have to go back, and that's going to cost the buyer a couple extra bucks. You
Exactly.
know. So we hate to do it, but that's just one thing the FHA does require.
So really, again, it's just about being not just the buyer's agent, but really the listing agent, letting them know this is not FHA approved as it is, and helping the seller get it ready for FHA approvals.
Exactly.
So, right. So we have we have a question here. There was a question from Mark Dixon. We'll go in order. Can you bring that question back up from Mark? Yes. As an appraiser, what would your recommended plan of action be if a home does not appraise? Do you have
question. Yeah.
Okay,
So
plan of
the
action.
main thing, make sure all the facts are correct. You know, did the square footage come out correctly? And this would be a thing leaning on to the realtor, where the realtor should kind of have an idea.
Sure. And that's when you
and-
call the realtor, the listing agent.
Yeah, the listing agent. So make sure that all the information is correct. And then from there, you know, you could have just go through the appraisal and make sure everything's accurate. And, you know, for instance, did they not use maybe some recent sales, or all the sales in the neighborhood maybe older in sale date, where, you know, the market is changing. So you should analyze some recent sales.
Well, he's saying as an appraiser. So do you have a plan of action?
What is it?
As you
typically,
yourself.
So there's been times where I reach out to the realtor and just say, hey, you know, like, what comps did you use to
gotten
come
that
up
call
with?
from you.
I've gotten that call from a lot of,
And I'll be honest with you, I'd like to know. And there's been times where the realtor said, I'm sorry, I don't have anything else.
So I'm going to make a suggestion for any listing agents or buyer's agents. Anytime an appraiser calls you, they're trying to get information, and you are sort of the beacon of light to get this appraised. So save their number, and when they call you, you answer as sweet as pie, like a little cupcake. Hi, appraiser, how are you today? And then, it's very helpful when the appraiser and the realtor are able to talk, so that you can give information.
There's times where the realtor, hey, these are the MLS numbers that I used. And I was like, great,
helpful, right?
and it's very helpful. And so I don't want to say we work together.
Sure.
It's
but you utilize their information that they came up with to
and
to
sometimes there's things that you don't know or you're unaware of that, like maybe they have the listing that's coming down that's sold without going in MLS or
and there's been times where I did a pending sale inside the same neighborhood, so I could see the pending sale and all that, so I knew the contract price. But I try to always give a heads up call and just say, hey,
nice.
Where's your, where was your thought process? Like what, give me some ideas of how you guys were thinking of it. I always try to do that.
That's good.
Sometimes, majority of the time, they're rolling in closing costs sometimes, which
it can affect it.
Yeah. So sometimes if they're rolling in closing costs, that sometimes the value's just not there where you can't do it.
Yeah.
So, but again, I hate for it to happen. I don't want to seem like I'm the person out there, hurting the deals and all that.
You're trying by calling and getting as much information as possible. Right.
But at the end of the day, my job is to protect the lender. I don't want the lender and even the individual buying the home, I don't want them, say the individual gets a job transfer next year. Meanwhile, they may be overpaid for this house and so my job is to kind of protect the lender and also protect the buyer too. That's how I try to look at it.
Sure.
Of course. I know Jordan.
We had another great question by Jordan. So if we can get that.
Right,
how much value do you give a classic non-screen-in pool if there's no other pool home comps?
Yeah. So it depends on the age of the pool.
We know you're a pool home guy.
I am. So
hopefully you have Kevin for your pool home.
So I sold my pool home, I think about 3 years ago. And I really, really studied the market on that point. And it was a countryside house. When I say countryside, the neighborhood. And I could prove that it was $35,000 is what I could prove. But it was a newer pool. It was screen enclosed. It had a lot of patio area and things like that. Right. But also too, sometimes a pool's a liability. If you do a kind of an older 1950 house and this pool, you got a pool in the backyard and it's pretty much just a hole in the ground. People look at that as a liability. Yes. So it all depends on the age of the pool, how much maintenance is going to be kind of involved in it. You kind of take it on a case-by-case basis. I know that's kind of maybe
so $35,000 for a pool that you found 3 years ago, which is the number you've given me in the past when it's screened in and it's newer. So a couple years ago, I'm sort of like the CMA person of the two of us, and I always research and look through all of the CMAs that we or the appraisals that we receive. And I did an appraisal CMA for an older house with an older pool, and I was noticing that the pool homes in the older home areas were actually devaluing the homes.
There's times where I've seen it too.
Because if it's 40, 50 year old, then you need rebar siding. It's huge. The water, consumption is huge. But if there's a neighborhood, Southwest, Gainesville has a lot of the newer neighborhoods. All of them have pools. Right. If you don't have a pool, it's almost like the pools are worth, more than $35,000.
Yeah, and that's where I was going. So, for instance, your $500,000-$600,000 house, you expect a pool.
Exactly.
So that pool could be worth
a screen.
Yeah, so that pool could be.
Wait a minute, all y'all screened pool people.
I don't have a screened pool on my pool either.
Thank you. Because mine's more contemporary.
Tioga's a little different because Tioga doesn't really have screened pools. So you would compare that, but Hale or any of the Southwest 24th, Avenue neighborhoods,
people with trees in your neighborhood,
right? You have to have one. So
our house does. We had an issue where we had a tree fall on our first screen enclosure at our previous house. So when we did our most recent pool, we didn't want a screen enclosure, and but going back to kind of what the market expects, so if you're in, if I'm buying a $600,000 house, I kind of want to have a pool in my backyard.
Right. So you might value the pool as more
so
than
if
the
I'm working,
35,000.
if I'm working in a neighborhood that majority of the homes have a pool, then I'm going to compare it to other pool homes.
Right.
And I may go a little bit further away, for instance, like a Wilds Plantation or something like that, where a lot of the homes have pools. So I'm going to try to stay within similar pools.
Okay.
There's, but sometimes it can be hard to, not finding a pool, and sometimes pools play a large part. It depends on what markets it's in.
Sure. Right. Yep. That's true. All right. So we are coming to an end. We will ask this one last question, which is kind of where Sky's going with this. She's asking, do you think the properties are or almost are at the top of their values for many years to come? But I really want to throw this in there. So we have this last question. Where do you see our market going?
Yeah. So a couple things. There's just such a huge shortage of inventory.
Right.
So that's one thing. Interest rates are at a really low rate.
Although they're rising slightly.
But
Yeah.
they're
Yes.
still crazy
Oh,
low.
absolutely. Yeah. So, with a shortage of inventory, interest rates, on every appraisal, I look at the active listings and the closed sales, and it's supply and demand. Yep. So all of a sudden, if you start seeing supply and demand kind of out of whack,
right,
then that's when you may see a little bit change in value. Mm-hmm. But, I'm doing appraisals now where there's 30 sales in a market area and there's 2 listings.
Yeah.
So, as long as you have that in play, I think values are going to continue tricking up.
Right.
But again, I don't have a crystal ball or anything, but that's just kind of my kind of overlook on the market, where as long as there's a continued shortage of inventory, as long as the interest rates are low, I think it's a great time to buy.
One more question before that is, how long do you need now to get the appraisal done? Because we're finding that we need to close more than 30 days because you all are so jam-packed with the refis, with these low rates and these sales.
Yeah.
Anytime a house comes on the market, it's sold.
Right. So we're running about 10 to 14 days. Which, if you're trying to do a 30-day close, that's pretty tight.
Yeah. So order ahead of time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because for a while, I think they were waiting. There's been
inspections,
times where
waiting for the
you wait to do the
inspections,
home inspection, where I still get it all the time. Which it's, again, time is kind of the essence, where if you're going to wait, a week to get a home inspection, and then you expect me to kind of turn it over in a week, that's going to be tough too.
Yeah.
If you have maybe a 45-day close, maybe you can get away with it, but sometimes you can't.
So I am finding in 2 of my last sales, not the last 2, but 2 of my last ones, we're not closed yet. They had an appraisal, like they don't even need an appraisal. They just the waiver. Yeah. So are you noticing that for you?
Yeah, there's definitely sometimes where and that's on a lending side, they may be they may qualify based on certain criteria and things like that. But there's been times where I've gotten an appraisal order and 2 days later they canceled it. Right. And majority likely they've gotten an appraisal waiver on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow. But that's just taking.
I just found 2 in the last 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So we'll see that more often.
That's crazy.
What's that?
That they're I don't know. It's giving me flashbacks because we've all been through the different markets.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Gosh, I so wanted to get into that. How do you feel? You came in 2006 to Gainesville. We started in 2006. Yeah. Somebody today wrote me a newish, not brand new, but newish realtor, and he was like, "Wow, this market's crazy." Right. What was this? Was this similar to when you started? Yeah. And I think Gainesville was really 2004, 2005 was where this was the market. Because when we came in, it was suddenly changing to where the inventory was flipping.
Yeah, and so I actually, like I said earlier, I came up from West Palm Beach. We saw it down there earlier than Gainesville did.
Yes.
And in Gainesville, with the university, with the hospital, they may not be
insulated.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're always a little behind.
We're down in the community I grew up in. We were a lot of tradesmen and construction and things like that. So, once that kind of jeopardized kind of the market, but up here, and 2, we saw maybe a 25% dip. Kind of looking back at it from hindsight, you can track it to the bottom when the bottom bottomed out, and it was about a 25%, 30% decrease.
But do you feel when it was a heightened market down in West Palm Beach, do you feel the similarities with this heightened market right now?
It can change so quickly. Yeah. That's the thing where it's if the interest rates start going up, I think lending has done a really good job too of kind of, everything that we do is actually, every appraiser's report is in the same format actually.
Sure, right.
So, Fannie Mae and all that, they have a database. So there's times where, some of my reports, when it goes through underwriting, something may flag it for some reason. Right. So at that point, I have to go back and kind of justify it and things like that. So I think lending is doing a better job, kind of I want to say protecting the market too, where a lot of the loans that went into foreclosure back in the day, they were maybe a little bit higher risky and maybe.
So they've tried to correct it.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think what's fueling us, besides the low rates, are people moving from states that are shut down.
Yes.
So it's
we have a
until
lot
we
of
see
Miami
that
buyers
off.
coming in and New York buyers here in insulated Gainesville.
Yeah, and I think Gainesville is such a unique place that everybody's coming to the university and the hospitals and things like that. So we see a constant turnover of properties. So Gainesville is such a unique town, and real estate market too is very unique.
I can say in our years of being together, being in real estate, and working together, when we first started, it was like people would move every 7 to 10 years. And now it's more like 2 to 4 at most. People are just
there's a couple homes
very transient here.
I've appraised a couple houses like 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
And that's just the way it is.
You just see it again,
Yeah,
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. We could go on, like I said, for
we'll
hours.
Have to have you come back.
Yeah, definitely.
And we want to welcome and say hello to Miranda. Your wife is here, saying you're the cutest appraiser in town. So we appreciate both of you for coming on, and thank you everyone for your amazing questions. If you have any more, we can probably have them on the podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say too. I do have a Facebook page.
Oh, perfect.
So
okay.
If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message or just post it.
Yeah, you've always
your
been really
Facebook
great.
page?
It's Gainesville Appraisal Service.
Okay.
There you go.
So feel free to kind of reach out there and.
Yeah, we definitely call you every once in a while and just chill in your ear.
And that's the same thing too. So I know a lot of people that watch your show are realtors. If you have an appraisal that comes in low and you want me to glance at it, that's
You've done that for us before.
Yeah, don't be afraid to call me or send me a text message and just say, hey, you got a minute, and it may take me a little bit to get back with you. Once I kind of have a down moment, I'll try to help you and go from there.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you
Very
so much.
good.
We appreciate you being on, and thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully you learned a lot this week, and we'll see you next week at 2:00.
Well,
we've got a couple of things. Yes.
Wait,
well,
don't
we're so
forget
far
our
behind.
sponsors. If you have a property that you need managed, please feel free to reach out to K&R Property Management, where we invest in your investment. You can reach us at rent@knrpm.com.
Yes, and thank you to J&P Florida Handyman Services, our sponsor, and a local handyman who will take care of your remodels, repairs, and maintenance. His contact information is below.
Join our team at join@buysellrebell.com and learn how you can become a realtor.
And if you want to get social, let's be social on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and on YouTube. Thank you.
Join us on our blog. Sorry, I'm not used to being rushed. Join us on our blog at buysellrebell.com/blog.
Kicking us out of here.
Where you could get questions, comments, answers from the show today, and anything that we have that we've discussed.
And as we talked about, we are streaming live on YouTube, so subscribe to our channel at Rabell Realty Group.
That's right, and we can't ever close out a show without remembering to thank the Fiesta Media full podcast production. So if you're interested in a podcast, please feel free to reach out at the number that I'm sure will pop up any moment. There you go.
There you go.
352-327. Hopefully you got those last couple digits.
We're really fast getting out of here. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.